Clara Barton dominated the early history of the American Red Cross. Well, it was created to serve America in peace and in war. Barton first realized the need for the organization during the Civil War. Well, 2 weeks into the war, a regiment from Barton's home state of Massachusetts was attacked by a pro-slavery mob in Baltimore on the way to the Capitol. Well, 3 men were killed and many were injured. And when she learned that some of the soldiers were her former students, 40-year-old Barton rushed to the train station to meet them. Well, she found the men dazed and bleeding and missing most of their baggage. They were taken to the state chamber at the Capitol and left to fend for themselves. Well, Barton jumped into immediate action. She enlisted the help of a few women, and they gathered all the supplies that they could find. Well, Clara later told a friend, "We emptied our pockets and came home to tear up old sheets and towels and handkerchiefs, and we filled a big box with all manner of serving utensils, thread, needles, thimbles, scissors, pins, buttons, strings, salves, and tallow." Well, then she fed them, bandaged their wounds, and read to them from the vice president's desk. News of Barton's efforts reached the families of the soldiers, and they began sending her supplies. Well, convinced that she was more organized than any government department, she took out an ad in a newspaper asking for money and provisions. Well, she loaded the supplies into wagons and took them straight to the camps and battlefields around Washington, often arriving before the fighting even stopped. Well, to her, each soldier was an individual and merited the best possible treatment. Barton became known as the angel of the battlefield. Well, for her courage and kindness she showed to the soldiers, I dedicate our next block to Clara Barton. Now, this is a beautiful quilt sewn in reproduction fabrics by Lois Thornhill, and the border was designed by Kathy Schaefer. Now, these corners are just miniatures of the Clara Barton star. Well, first I'll show you how to make the block, and then I'll show you how to do the border treatment. Clara Barton is an elegant addition to my gallery of stars. Now you need to have 5 different fabrics for her block. You need to have 2 different darks. Right here they are. Oh, the beautiful red and blue are my 2 darks. These are my 2 mediums right here. And of course you need to have that same background around the outside edge. Now you make Clara Barton's star in quarters. Let me show you the pieces. Right here in the center, they start out from 4-inch squares. You need to have, for this piece, the dark and the red right sides together. For this piece right here, that same dark with the second medium right sides together. 4-inch squares. Ooh, I did some of my work. I drew that diagonal line and then sewed a 1/4-inch seam right down both sides. And then all you need to do is just cut those on the angle and press to the dark side. So you always drop them on the pressing mat with the dark on the top so that when you just lift that up and over, then that seam is right behind that dark piece. And oh, I like steam, but that's completely up to you, and you can just do that good old assembly line ironing. Get that done fast. Okay, now these pieces are squared up to 3.5 inches. So use your 6x6 ruler, drop that diagonal line. Ooh, let me see, am I gonna make it? Oh, just a tad. Okay, diagonal line right down through, centered at 3.5 inches so that I have just a tip I can cut off here. Trim 2 sides, turn that around. Ooh, let's see. What a funny looking piece. It's a good thing we square up, huh? Okay. Now, that's the 3.5 inch piece. You've got this right here, it's the opposite, and then you have the second piece that's going to go right in there. All right, those are done. Now the points come from rectangles right here. These pieces, I have the dark on the bottom, the background right sides together to it. Starts out a 4.5 inch by 9-inch rectangle. I drew on a 4.5-inch squaring line, diagonal lines, and stepped on the gas with a 1/4-inch seam on both sides. Boy, and if your machine will sew with something other than red thread, go for it. Okay, then just lay your ruler right on here, cut right down through on the squaring line, and then cut on the diagonal lines. And then once again, stack these up. These are going to go to the dark side. Now, I always think about Clara. Gosh, just a little girl. She ended up doing some great things. And I think that whenever people grow up and do great things, they start out whenever they're just young. She was actually born on Christmas Day. That's pretty special. Born on Christmas Day in Massachusetts in 1821, long time ago. And her dad was a farmer. And she grew up on that farm, just taking care of those animals. Okay, now this time I'm not going to square it up, but what I am going to do is just draw diagonal lines right down through corner to corner. This is different, no squaring up, but a diagonal line on all 4 of these. And if you drop it so that you have the seam going down, then you should be able to get that line going along there. Okay, just 2 more. But anyhow, when she was just 11 years old, her brother David fell off the roof. Now, she had a job. She had some nursing to tend to. Well, she took care of her brother for 2 years. 2 years she told stories to him and nursed him in his bedroom. Okay, now let's take these pieces. They have all those diagonal lines drawn. Now you need to have 4 1/4-inch squares of each one of the mediums. I'm just going to put these right sides together, making that strange looking point on my star. Right sides together here, and then good old assembly line sewing. Just line up that presser foot. Well, where's that presser foot and that foot pedal? Okay, drop it on the left side, and then keep that 1/4-inch seam allowance, and just keep on going right down. How about a stiletto right here? Boy, when you don't square those up, they sure do look strange, don't they? Well, there was young Clara, taking care of her brother David for 2 years. She told him stories, played quiet games with him, nursed him back to health. I guess that's really where her first nursing job came in. She was a shy girl. She actually never married. It's hard to believe she started teaching school just so she could get over her shyness. She taught school for 18 years. In a way, I feel like Clara Barton. I, too, was shy whenever I started teaching school. Can't believe it now, but I was pretty shy. Okay, so just turn it around, line it up on the opposite side, go right down that 1/4-inch seam, step on the gas. How fast can you get this done? Line it up. And you know what's really interesting? After she taught for 18 years, the government decided that she was pretty successful at that, so they hired her. She was the first woman employee hired by the government. Now, she worked in the U.S. Patent Office. She worked as a copier, but nonetheless, she was the first employee. She must have been good. Okay, take these pieces now and just cut them on the diagonal right through. Let me get this one. I want to square up this one for you. Cut right down through. When you open that up, these are the pieces that you get. Okay, now take this, press it to the dark side. We are on our last step here. This is the last piece in this. Just open that up, press that right down through the center. This piece gets squared up to 3.5 inches. So now drop the diagonal line. There's a couple of diagonal lines. But drop the diagonal line going right down through this seam. Make sure the 3.5 is here and the 3.5 is right here. And that's what's important about it, because when you square up these pieces, you want the seams to go exactly right into those points, because if they don't do it right now, it's very difficult to put your block together. All right, that's it. And actually, by the time you take all of these pieces, then you're going to have points throughout the star. let me show you this quarter. Okay, so now we've got this piece we did earlier right here. Now this piece right here we're going to put, and opposite it you have to have that dark piece right next to it, and this is the 3.5 inch corner square that we've used on all of those pieces. Looking good. All right, now set this quarter together. Just take it, flip it right sides together, line it up like that. Same 1/4 inch seam. Let me see if I can get this done quickly. Ooh, line that up right there. Match that close. Okay, just go right down and hold your stiletto. Line up those outside edges. Get that matched. Okay, but this one right on behind. Boy, I don't think I could have done what Clara Barton did on the battlefield. Do you know that when she went out there with those soldiers, she got there before the fighting was done, and she would go ahead and just take a knife and take those bullets out. And if she ran out of clean bandages, she would use corn husks. Incredible story. I don't think I would have liked looking at that at all. Okay, right here at this seam, you want to get and push the seam here towards the background. Open that up. Make sure that's lined up. And the seam underneath is going in the opposite direction. Match up that corner. Step on the gas. Ooh, we've got that corner done. Now, let's take a look. Oh, looking good. All right. Match in the center. 1/4 inch seam right up here. Perfect. So once you put that in place, this should be 6.5 inches. Press it flat. It should be 6.5 inches. Then all you need to do is just flip these, go right down the center, flip it across the other way, sew your block together, and it'll be beautiful. In 1869, Barton went to Europe for a much-needed rest, but soon found herself in the midst of the Franco-Prussian conflict. Well, she was always willing to help, so she worked with the International Red Cross, distributing supplies in France and Germany. And when she came home, she dedicated her efforts towards establishing what would become the American Red Cross. Well, she was successful in 1881. The greatest mother in the world. Now, this block is a variation of the Red Cross as identified by Barbara Brackman. Well, Nancy Page published it in her syndicated newspaper column in the 1930s. Now, I made it out of authentic dress and shirting, reproduction fabrics taken directly from that time period, where you can see the delicate vines and the star medallions and moonflowers that were copied from a stack of fabrics a quilter had cut years ago. Well, Lois Thornhill made the Clara Barton star in the same reproduction fabrics. Well, the colors are typical of the 1870s to the 1890s, just about the same time Clara founded the Red Cross. Now, it's beautiful in reproduction fabrics, but if you would like, you can make it in beautiful contemporary fabrics as well. Kathy Schaefer did this one. Oh, it's just bright and beautiful, vibrant. And she took one part of the block, the leftover from the corners, and added it to the back for her label. It's beautiful. Now I'll show you how to do this border. To make this quilt, you need to cut out 10 Clara Barton blocks. And sew 6 together, just as I showed you. But those last 4 are something different. Now, this is the block right here. The last 4 are actually miniatures of the larger block. So when I sewed this one, I squared these up to 3.5 inches. When you make these, you have to square them up to 2.5 inches before you go on. And then you just sew them into quarters, because these quarters are used in the corners. And you'll have a few extra pieces left over. Just use those extra pieces for the label on the back, like Kathy Schaefer did. Now, when you sew this block together, you sew it together with 2 different colors of lattice, and the lattice zigzags through the quilt. It's great. Let me show you. Now, you start up here with one fabric, and it just zigzags along through the blocks so that the piece that you need right here is another black. Now, of that fabric, you need to have 9 2-inch by 12.5-inch piece lasts, or whatever size your block is. Now the second fabric, let's trace that along, zigzags along here. And so the piece that we need right in here is going to be another green. Ooh, like that. And it's just going to zigzag down along and finish off right in the bottom row with another green. Now over here, I need to have another black. Ooh, looking good. Now right here where these two fabrics intersect, you make a little piece square using both of those colors. These square up to 2 inches as well. Oh, that looks great. That fits in. Okay, and now over here in this corner, ooh, let's see. How am I going to turn this? Keep on turning it. Ooh, all right. So it creates that mitered effect along there. Now, so your whole top together, and then as soon as you get your top together, you're going on to your borders. You need to have 3 different fabrics, and they are all 2.5 inches wide. You have the 2.5-inch background fabric, and then the other 2 fabrics you sew together so they're in big, long pieces. And what makes this quilt really fun is all those piece squares along the borders. Now they come from grid sewing just like this. It starts out as a 3-inch square, diagonal lines, 1/4 inch on both sides, and then when you cut them apart, you see right here, this piece square, it's the red and the beige, you need to do sets with these other pieces of fabric as well. So you have these whole big long pieces with the 2 strips sewn together and those pieced triangles on the ends. Ooh, it looks so great. It's a lot of fun. Now, get that light background sewn on opposite sides. Let me just sew a quilt right here. See how fast I can get that. Just slip this up in place. The light goes the whole way around the outside edge first, and then we're going to work with those strips that go along next. Now, you actually need to do some sewing before you can work on the corners. You can't measure it out. But when you finally see what size your top is, then the borders are going to go on just like this. I need to have a little red piece for this corner right here. And, ooh, let me move that down. It actually goes right there like that. And then this last piece, once you know what size, you literally need to trim this away, make it shorter, and then fit that right in there. So get your whole top sewn together, then all you need to do is some machine quilting and binding. I finished my quilt top and I just love it. These reproduction colors are so pretty. Next, I took my top and I layered it with my backing. Now the backing is wrong side down. On top of that is 100% cotton. Oh, it's just a nice thin batting. And then I spread my top from center out and then safety pinned it. Oh, this is a pinning tool. I used 1-inch safety pins, and all you need to do is just safety pin away from where you're going to be machine quilting. Just go ahead and push that pin right through. And then I used bicycle clips. You roll it up from the edge, and then just take a clip and wrap it around your roll so you can hold that inside the arm of the sewing machine. Now I have 2 stitches that I would like to show you that will make your machine quilting go much easier. Now right now I have invisible thread in the top. You should match your bobbin thread to your backing, but I've got my red in there just so you can see. But watch what this stitch does. When you start, it locks it. It locks it right in place, and then it goes forward. And you just keep your hands like this. It's best if you have a flat bed on your sewing machine so that you can just go ahead and roll that right along there. Now when I get down here, I'm going to lock it off again. I want to show you what happens. Just whenever you get right to this stitch, okay, push the button and it'll lock it right in place. So all you need to do is just go ahead and cut those threads. That really works well. That's one of the things with machine quilting, because you can always so easily just lose your threads. Now, I have one more stitch that I can't wait to show you. I had my automatic setting on, and what I'm going to do is tighten up my top thread up to a number 8. That is really tight. And I have this stitch that actually looks like hand quilting. You're going to see it. Hand quilting done by machine. Let me see one more, and I'm nearly there. All right. And just, I still have that red thread in, but it's so you can really see it. Now, I'm just going to go and do like a 1/4-inch stitch from the edge. And it looks like a triple stitch, what we call a triple stitch. But it has 3 stitches on top of each other, then it takes a little stitch. And actually what you see is the invisible thread take the little stitch, and then in the 3 stitches that are layered up is the bobbin thread that's actually coming up through. And whenever you look at that, it just looks so much like hand quilting. I can't believe it. So now you know that you can do stitches on your sewing machine that look like hand stitches. Isn't that great? Now, whenever you're doing your quilting, the best way is to go ahead and anchor it down through the lattice, right down through the center, and then go back and forth across the smaller lattice just to anchor the whole quilt. And then you can go ahead and choose. Do you want to do a stitch in the ditch around the block once you anchor it? Follow the outline of it, and even go right in the inside just to anchor the whole quilt. And then all I really need to do to finish this is add my binding, and you'll have a great finished quilt. No one realized what camp life would be like in the Civil War. Women were sending their men with such impractical items as down pillows and fancy parlor quilts made out of velvet with fancy stitches on them. Well, it didn't take women long to realize their error, and soon they were producing supplies with factory-like efficiency. Well, foot treadle sewing machines were invented in 1849. They were in great demand, and the women pooled their money to buy them. And what a help! A shirt that took 2 days to sew by hand only took about 1 hour by machine. In 1861, the Union government established the U.S. Sanitary Commission, and they took charge of setting up the supply stations and hospitals and collecting donations. Well, the Chicago office was one of the largest branches, and it received mountains of donations as socks and trousers and shirts. One woman sent a box of cookies with a note, and this is what it said: "These cookies are expressly for sick soldiers, and if anybody else eats them, I hope they will choke them." Well, I sure hope a soldier got them. Well, the cost of transporting the supplies had nearly depleted its treasury. Somehow, the women volunteers needed to raise more money, so they devised a plan to collect donations of goods from citizens and sell the items at a huge fair. Now, this sounds like the start of a church bazaar, doesn't it? Well, they hoped they could raise $25,000. So everyone rifled through their attics and closets, and they came up with some long-forgotten treasures. And what wonderful treasures they found. Ooh, they found some lace that some of the ladies didn't want to wear anymore, and an old wooden bucket. How about a candle mold, perfect for the sale, and a lantern, somebody could use that, and butter churns. Ooh, the people in Chicago were buying their own butter in the stores, and a rug beater, perfect for all of those quilts they found. And what a stack of them. Well, they must have found a 9-patch quilt. That's perfect. And a flying geese, red and white, the colors of the Red Cross. And look at this drunkard's path, favorite old-time pattern. And of course, the wonderful wool crazy quilt, more utilitarian, something for a soldier, or maybe even a wool log cabin, nice narrow strips, nice and warm, perfect for a soldier's bed. Now every woman in the kitchen could use a new apron, nice and fresh and clean. And then there was probably a stack of these books. Well, who would guess what the titles are? You'd never know. And of course, a hand-crank sewing machine, a very valuable item. Well, the fair was a stunning success. The Chicago Sanitary Commission raised close to $100,000. Well, soon fairs were organized in dozens of other states. What a time in our country, raising money and delivering supplies to courageous soldiers. Well, we're grateful to Clara Barton, a humanitarian who dedicated her life to helping others. And may you enjoy making her star.